Welcome to our Mochi Podcast, the only podcast rated R for Robin. Today, my guest is Mark Beylin, co-creator for thePixelPortraits.com and co-founder for Myco.space. Mark, thanks for coming on.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for
fucking
having
nailed
me.
that
It's
intro.
a pleasure to be on. Yeah, that was great.
I've been practicing. I've been trying to get down my soapbox talk.
It's. I feel like it's an art. As I've started spending more and more time on calls, there's a real art form to the soapbox, or there's a YouTube tone of voice as well. That's the one that they use there, or on Twitch there's a very unique one. On TikTok there's they're all different, but there's very specific ways of speaking on each.
Yeah, YouTube's the really it's the really poppy, quick, hard, fast cuts, really quippy.
Right.
Tim?
I think I remember hearing something about how YouTube, there's something about the way that you speak, that those YouTubers speak, that is optimized to keep you around, or to keep you listening for the next.
Mm-hmm.
There's it's somebody at some point figured out that this is the right way to talk to people in videos if you want for sort of virality or
mm-hmm.
Attention grabbiness. And I think that's why they're that's why their tone of
they're
the way it is, and it's
yeah, there's so much statistics around it. They have all of the conventions where they kind of learn best practices stuff, where everybody learns the different algorithms, right, and how to maximize your subscribe, and hit that bell notification bullshit.
Right, exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's why I don't use YouTube anymore.
I still got to consume it because I like to watch video game media.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Aside from Twitch, there's no other proper way to get your own on-demand video game coverage or gameplay.
Yeah, I'm actually trying to get more into Twitch as well, personally, but not for video games. I don't play video games at all. But I'm trying to get into streaming, live streaming.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's this huge new wave coming of direct media, and
mm-hmm.
being able to this is something we think about for Myco, is as we're building this company, we want to build in a way that's generally in public and allows people to kind of come in and join us, and help us sort of co-create. And I think part of that is talking to them live, right, in a very sort of casual conversational way.
Mm-hmm.
Being able to own our media so that we don't have to rely on the New York Times to publish
yeah.
about us. We can just publish it ourselves. And so us having a Twitch live stream is what we are trying to get to move towards. But I'm now starting to learn about okay, well, what's the right way to do this? What's the sort of best practices that that keeps people engaged in your live stream,
mm-hmm.
at even if it's not a game.
Yeah, there's a lot going. So for one, to be successful on Twitch, if you just want to play music and then be a hot girl.
Right, that works. Yeah.
So I don't mean to sound sexist, but unfortunately, there's that is currently one of the trending things. It was kind of when a lot of the repost websites where you're able to just click this and then you'll gain $5 from the money weasel, or
right.
Click if you like boobs.
Right.
I think Twitch is actually interesting in that it is compared to YouTube, it's still very much in its infancy in terms of being refined for the user experience and for the creators' experiences.
Right.
Right there, and now they just have the platform right now. Well, one of the guys who I've followed, who does a lot of coverage on just making recommendations for people who are just starting out on Twitch, and so he's a gamer, but he does just a lot. He started in music, alpha gaming, and one of the big things he talks about is just Twitch is still so far really not optimized for small people to kind of get discovered, but it definitely has a lot of room to grow.
Yeah, and I think also it's just not optimized for non-gaming. I don't know if that's something they care about, but I onboarded to the platform as a streamer or whatever a week or so ago, and I couldn't find. They're well, what's your category? You have to pick a category. Mm-hmm. What's your category? And I was I'm not a gamer. They wanted me to pick games, and I'm I'm not a gamer. And I was can I write product design, or I don't know, like philosophy or like I don't know what I am, but I'm not, you know. And I had to settle on like music because music was apparently the like least gamey
There's also
category that
just
they had.
talking.
Is that a thing? Is that maybe I just like couldn't find that?
Yeah,
It's just called, the category is just talking.
I know recently they've got like a just talking. They've got musicians. They've got like cooking channels and stuff.
That
And
makes sense.
I think there are like plenty of artists who also do like live art streams and stuff. And I'm sure they can do some sort of like dev or like programming geared streams.
Yeah, dev programming stuff is one, and then, but in general, just like us, because our big thing is like we want to just like sort of like shoot the shit on a live stream and like talk to people, have people come join us, and like you know have it be this sort of like interactive thing. Yeah, it's like basically just just talking. So that's good to know.
Yeah, let's take a few steps back. Can you talk about like what is Myco? What's the idea with it? What is the org business?
Sure. Yeah. So Myco is sort of, the first way I'll say is like Myco is sort of the synthesis of close to like 4 years of work that I've been able to do in the sort of crypto space. And, you know, a lot of that being the sort of like last few years and, you know, the sort of last bull cycle, everyone was kind of discovering, you know, we have these like new, you know, coordination tools, you know, blockchains and, you know, smart contracts and things like that. And, you know, we can all come together and do these new things together, but we don't really know what it is. We don't really know what the best way to do it is. And this is kind of coming at the same time as this new sort of trend, or actually it's kind of an older trend, but around, you know, online communities, right? Very similar to actually Mochi, right? Is I think my prime example of this. You know, like we call them sort of like digital social clubs. That's like the best verbiage we've found. But it's really just like groups of people who have shared interests. Usually there's social graphs. The social graphs of their members like has enough overlap going into it that there's like sort of like a foundation of relationships. And it's just people coming together, talking to each other. And then what we say is like create and share value, which is like super vague. It doesn't really mean anything, but like practically speaking means that, you know, like the way that a group of people might create value is, you know, you can like create internet content that's like probably valuable to somebody. You can like create digital media products. You can create physical products. You know, you can create like sort of many offerings that people on the internet might want to like buy. And so you're sort of like co-creating them together, and then hopefully being able to like split the value that you get, you know, the revenue or the profit, fairly among the people who, you know, are part of the club, who like contributed to the particular effort, and sort of like giving that money out, sort of distributing it fairly.
So is the main direction in terms of like web design? Is it for more monetization?
Our goal is to make it so that anybody who wants to start their own Mochi type club can do so with like minimal like overhead or previous experience, right? Where you can basically say like, I want to start a digital social club. You like launch a club on Myco, you automatically get this sort of like way to track ownership. You get these like legal agreements that sort of bind everybody together. It's not technically a company, but it like sort of relies on legal agreements, IP sharing agreements, to sort of like underpin the thing.
So you're spawning competition for Mochi.
I mean, competition to some degree, yes, but I don't think that like ultimately Mochi can't scale like infinitely anyways, right? Like Mochi, these communities are like necessarily going to be limited in their size. And so competition is not quite the right word in my opinion, only because like, sure, I suppose you're competing for attention to some degree, but at a higher level, I think we're going to see much more. And this is something Gabe and I actually talked about when he was in New York City, is this idea, what he called like gang of gangs, gangs of gangs, right? Where you have like groups of people coming together up to sort of like Dunbar's number, 150 people, sort of like the natural limit on how many people you can get in a community before it starts to sort of like
branch out into
sub.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. And so you have these like groups of groups. And so I guess to that point, like, are they, you know, sort of competitive to Mochi? I suppose only in as much as like, I don't know, any YouTube channel is like a competitor for any other YouTube channel. But Practically speaking, no, it's much more around, our whole view is like, we think there's like a ton of like locked up value or like unrealized value from young people who are like really talented, really skilled. A lot of them like, have post-secondary degrees, whatever, aren't using their degrees properly because they never were able to get a job, in whatever field they studied. And more importantly, they're like afraid to become entrepreneurs, right? Like becoming an entrepreneur is like super high risk. Starting a company like is really daunting, legal, accounting, all this other stuff. But our goal is to like sort of create this like framework that makes it just really easy for people to make money with their friends online. And that's kind of the like what it really comes down to with this whole digital social club thing is like you get a group of people, everybody's friends, everybody has some sort of base layer of trust with each other. And then it's like, how can we make money together? How can we like have fun and sort of grow things? And we think that if we can sort of like make it really cheap and easy for people to do that, where people don't have to like worry about being entrepreneurs, you don't have to have like a business degree to do that. We think there's like a lot of like money that people can make online through cooperation, right? Where, like we were talking about creators and Twitch streamers and YouTubers earlier. So much of that is this like hamster wheel of you're like an individual. You have to like post a video once every whatever week or day or whatever.
You got to feed the algorithm.
Feed the algorithms, right? And it's this like incredibly tiring thing. Like it's hard to do alone. And the creators that we see succeed these days are all like these like superstar generalists where they like edit their videos and make the content and do the research and do graphic design and marketing and like they do everything. But those people are like few and far between. And that's like totally fine. Our whole goal is sort of like, okay, well, what if you had like 5 people coming together to do this, right? And like, what would that be like? Because we think there's like this huge long tail of people who maybe like couldn't do it alone, but would totally be able to do it if they had sort of like friends, co-founders, so to speak, co-creators. And we think there's like this huge, sort of like market there. So that's what we're building with Myco. It's still blurry to describe what it is because we're still not exactly sure. But thankfully we're getting very, very, very close to being able to launch very soon. So I'm sure the Mochi folks at Mochi will be able to see that and be able to use the platform or ways.
So what stage would you say you're in? I was checking out the website. I was reading some of your like the blog entries.
Yeah, we are like single digit weeks away from a beta. We've basically been in this mode where we've been building and, people are very commonly like, well, if you're like proud of your initial launch, like you launched too late, whatever, which is sort of like one of the forcing functions against us of like, we want to launch quickly. But at the same time, there's just this practical reality because of what we're building. It's like, we're trying to bundle like many different community tools into one. And because of that, it's just like, practically speaking, just like a big thing to build. But also what we're trying to do is like, there would have been like an easier route if we had just like sort of built everything on, very basic, like Ethereum smart contracts, and kind of made things fully decentralized. And like, practically speaking, that's like easier. What we've tried to do is like, there's all these like different protocols out there for these different sort of pieces, right? Like Matrix.org is like a really great example of like, they have like a chat protocol. So we're using Matrix for chat. We're using, these like different companies for like ownership and like onboarding money and all this stuff. And so our job is like, instead of like launching our own protocol, we're like the ones sort of connecting all of them to each other.
You're linking the different tools to make it like more accessible.
Right. Exactly. Right. Because accessibility is like the point, the goal. But it's actually just like much harder to do that. And it just takes much more time because these protocols are like, all of them are in beta. None of them are used to being tied together in this unique way. And so it's just taken a little bit longer than we'd like. But it seems like we're sort of like rounding the corner and like very, very, very close to having a version of the product that's like usable, sort of like from the top down, I guess. I don't know if that's right. But yeah, we're very close. So things are coming.
How big is the team at present?
That's a blurry question is the short answer. The long answer is that it's like, so my co-founder and I, Arya, are sort of like our core full-time team. And then we have we have like two guys who are engineers who are based out of Brazil. We have another engineer who's based out of Kenya. And then we have like an illustrator who we're working with on like sort of a more part-time basis. We have like another designer who worked with us for other pieces of our product on a part-time basis. We have somebody who we're trying to get to join us in a sort of more community type role. So it's sort of like a sprawling, where like our approach to this stuff, and it sort of reflects what we think is going to happen with these like codes and the future of work and all this stuff, which is like, instead of everybody having like one full-time job and these teams being only like full-time employees, what we think is going to happen is a sort of movement towards like people working for like many organizations at once on a part-time basis. And so our team is sort of this like spectrum of like, you know, from Aria and I in the sort of core, who are like never going anywhere, and like even if we never raise funding again, like we would still keep working on this because this is like we have to, you know, it's sort of like essential for us. And then through that, there's this sort of spectrum of like, okay, we have these sort of full-time people, then we have part-time people, then we have contractors, then we have, you know, community members who are contributing, and you know, all that stuff.
Yeah, and I really like the piece that you, I think you wrote it, of the history of social clubs. Didn't know a lot of those people hung out with each other.
It's crazy. Like, this is one of those things that people don't realize, is that like most of the time when there have been pockets of exceptional people, they have been like very literally connected to each other. And there's all these different places.
That's why the Illuminati is real, man. You didn't add the Illuminati.
I mean, Illuminati's like, right. The Illuminati is like a great example, and everyone likes to, you know, but there's like at all points of history when there were like sort of like intellectual movements or science or like, you know, wisdom or like all these different sort of spheres, arts, they were always like coming together and like actually literally hanging out with each other. And because they all came together, like everybody in that sort of circle, small circle, ended up being better for it. And so, yeah, like the Stein Salon is like one of my favorite examples, because they just had so rock star artists all together.
Was that the one with like Virginia Woolf and
No, that one was, yeah, the Virginia Woolf one, and like John Maynard Keynes.
Keynesian economics.
Yeah, exactly. They were cool. They were like pushing very interesting social boundaries. But there was the one, they were like in Paris, and it was like Gertrude Stein basically just like had a shit ton of Picasso paintings, and she was like friends with Picasso and Matisse and like whatever. And so then they would come, and then, you know, this is like, if you've ever seen Midnight in Paris, that movie, it's all sort of like centered around that group of friends, who were all like hanging out together. And then there were like writers who were starting to join as well, American writers. And it's just one of those things of like exceptionality compounds on itself, if that makes any sense. Like when you are an exceptional person and you hang out with other exceptional people, and like you're sort of exchanging ideas and perspectives and like how you view the world, it has this like compounding sort of snowballing effect. And if you keep everybody around, right, if you keep everybody sort of coming back and like constantly reintegrating their new perspectives with each other, really, really magical things happen.
I would be curious though as to the factor that, like, you know, I imagine a lot of these people were also similarly affluent in their respective times, and so how much that might have contributed to their individual success. I'm sure that like being able to bounce off of other artists, creatives, and like philosophers definitely would have helped. But you know, having this baseline of either wealth or you know independence, financial independence,
yeah. It's a good question. I mean, I'm trying to think back. So like, one of the examples that I mentioned in the post was Benjamin Franklin and his like juntos, right? And those were definitely not affluent people.
Where does the word junto come from, by the way? Sorry to interrupt.
I think it's like a Spanish word for together or something. It's like some, or maybe it's like coming together or like collective, or it's like some. I think it's a Spanish word that has like a sort of derivation from the sort of like idea of collectivity. I don't know exactly.
Political grouping or faction. Yeah. 17th and 18th century Britain. Okay, yeah. From junta of the Spanish nouns ending in o. So yeah, you're right.
Right. Yeah. So he had those, and that was just like a social club that was not particularly affluent, from what it seems like, and that also seemed to serve some useful function. So that is one counterexample. The other one that comes to my mind though is just like, and I don't know the artists whether they like started off poor, but I know that like when the sort of Stein Salon, when they were like first coming to be, these artists were not like wealthy. They were not successful. You know what I mean? They were like kind of poor, and so
Picasso still had
like,
his ear.
Like, yeah, they like
like an amateur.
They weren't like so poor that maybe, I don't know. The short answer is like, I don't know. The long answer is like, yeah, the safety net probably did help to some degree, but I do think that there's some value regardless of wealth, just like the idea of, you know, like getting all these people together.
Collectivization plus like networking. I imagine they were able to connect people with like patrons or, you know, people who are willing to invest in, you know, a person's craft or, you know, whatever they're going for.
Right, exactly.
Which is definitely like, I mean, even in modern day, like Greek life and like business, a lot of like business positions, I think like, so like 60-70% of like presidents have like been connected to Greek life or masonry in some way.
Yeah, masonry in the United States is a big one.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting.
I think it's just one of those things that there's power, like networks are valuable, you know, and like communities are valuable. And I think this is something we're starting to see where like in a world that, how do I explain this? You know, I think what we're going to start to see a lot is like in a world where like there's this competition for attention, right? What you really are optimizing for is like long-term relationships, right? People sticking around, you know, within like communities or within, you know, sort of groups or whatever. Like you want like longevity, because that's where you know, people are like taking, but then they're also eventually giving back. And if you're around for long enough, that's like possible. And so that's like, I think that's going to be a big sort of like factor here as well, is like, how do you, and this is sort of what also underpins our thesis with Myco, is like, how do you build communities that are sustainable? How do you like make sure people are sticking around, constantly giving back and contributing and like whatever? And our thesis is that starts with like fair ownership of the community, where, you know, it's not like a subreddit where like, you know, Reddit owns the subreddit and then like, I don't know, a couple moderators moderate it. You actually, in theory, have like everybody in the community sort of like co-owning the subreddit depending on their degree of involvement. And so that keeps them coming back. That like gives them sort of an incentive to stick around rather than just like leaving to start their own.
It's kind of like direct, you know, direct equity in like whatever organization they're starting.
Right, exactly. Because, you know, so much of the time, like, it's just really hard to retain people, right, with these things. And so, but if you can retain people and if you have like longevity, then like you sort of propel yourself into success. Like if you stick around long enough, you'll like eventually win, is sort of the like thesis. And I think that's true. Like that's sort of true for even like the Masons, right? Like I think they've been around for like ages and ages, and you know, I think before the Masons were Masons, they were like Illuminati and all this stuff. And they like, you know, the like governments like tried to get rid of them, and then they like didn't. And then, you know what I mean? You sort of like, if you stick around for long enough, like you eventually like become a household name. You like eventually sort of make it.
You become the reason why people are wearing tinfoil in their heads.
Right, exactly.
And that's a win in itself.
You know, our whole thing is like, right. So it's like, how do we help anybody launch their own Illuminati, right? Like in a world of secret societies, like how can anybody have the freedom to be able to do that, to like organize together sort of in private. So yeah.
Cool. And then, so the other thing you've been working on is the PixelPortraits. And this is just like a kind of like an art commission piece in like the style of like CryptoPunks, correct?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting and strange story that happened quite organically. But basically, the way it happened was, I have a friend, Tom, who's like a mutual friend between me and a very good friend of mine, and we were in like a Telegram group together. We have like a trading group that we just talk about, you know, degenerate trading stuff, and we've been big fans of CryptoPunks, and he had been a big fan in particular, but he like couldn't afford one himself. And so for enough time went by where he said, okay, screw this. Like, I'm just going to make myself my own sort of like CryptoPunk sort of avatar, right? And so he made one for himself. He made one for a couple other people in our group. And then he started making them for the people who he worked with at his normal job, right? He worked at a company, in Canada that's like a ed tech software company, very like boring fast type stuff. And he just started making them for anybody who wanted them and who were sort of, there was like enough people sort of getting into crypto. He started making them for them. And he quickly realized that like people love these portraits, right? And there's definitely something there to like the sort of commission based NFT artwork where, you like provide a picture and, all the stuff. And, you can have a piece of like NFT artwork made for you that is like custom, where the commissioning it sort of feels like a sort of like a Medici type character, right? Where you're like a patron of the arts to a very like specific degree, where you are actually like the one having a say in the artwork rather than just like purchasing whatever NFT some artists happen to already make.
So would you say the fact that it's like an NFT is the thing that kind of creates the specific demand for it? Because like, I mean, there are plenty of like art platforms now where like you can just commission some like portraits, logos. Do you think the novelty right now as it stands is in the fact that it's an NFT? Is it like the style of like CryptoPunks that kind of makes it more iconic?
Yeah, I think it's definitely those two things. I like primarily the CryptoPunk style. He's really good at making them look like CryptoPunks would, or like in particular, if you like, people will request like characters from cartoons and things like that, and he also is able to like sort of CryptoPunkify them, which is cool. But for like pictures of people, he just like knows the right way to do it. And there are a number of sort of like rules behind how you sort of accomplish that. So that's part of it. Part of it is an identity thing where like people are using these, it's sort of like you have this NFT in your wallet, and therefore your address automatically has like an identity, right? And it's like a 24 by 24 pixel image, but it's like enough that like it gives a face to your Ethereum address. And so that's part of what we're also seeing. And that's why like the PixelPortraits project is really cool, is like a lot of these NFTs people are buying and then just like buying to flip. Whereas like, I think like 80 to 90% of the PixelPortraits that have ever been sold or that have ever been like created have never like exchanged hands, because it's just like people buying for themselves or like their spouses or their daughter, whatever, and they don't ever want to give them away because they're like, it's for me, like this is mine. It's just like, and so yeah, those are some great examples. And so yeah, like I think what we're seeing is like people, it's like a shift in the NFT economy where it's like less about NFTs as just like a piece of artwork. It's like artwork and also sort of like an identity tool. And so a lot of people use these in their as like Twitter avatars and things like that. That's another big one because it's also one of those things on Twitter where like if you have a punk style avatar on Twitter, you are sort of like automatically known to be in the crypto community. So that's another sort of like layer of adding to the identity.
Are there limitations on like what you can kind of like request to be in your commission into your thing? Because the crypto, the thing to me about like, so CryptoPunks, there were only like 10,000 made, right?
Right.
Where it seemed to me like a lot of them were just kind of like based on like randomized, like this one has the spiky hair, this one doesn't have sunglasses, this one has this kind of sunglass. And then it's just like it just seemed like there were 10,000 randomly generated. I don't know if like the original ones were kind of like based on anything. But so are there other more like limitations with these commissions that make it kind of different from that?
Yeah, so there's like sort of I think a few limitations. The primary one is around like names, where you can only like commission a particular name. Like names you have to sort of like register, and so like there's only going to be like one Mark portrait, and that's like But the other element is that I think what we're trying to do is like not make multiples of characters as well.
Mm-hmm.
So like Pikachu, there's only going to be like one Pikachu, pixel portrait.
Mm-hmm.
And so there, or like, for some of these companies, there's only going to be one. There's like one Bitcoin pixel portrait. And so even if you like spell the name differently, we're like not going to duplicate it. So, right. Yeah. So there's like some uniqueness there. And then I think there's the only other factor is like, I think he said like you can't have pets unless they're moon cats because pets are just impossible to draw. Mm-hmm. But the really cool thing, and this is like what I think makes this a little bit of a, and honestly what attracted me to the project, I'm, just like a smart contract dev on, I helped build like the website. But what attracted me to the project was like, he has this way where like, because of the way you're commissioning the portrait.
No, I accidentally popped you out. Could still hear you though. Mm.
Like, as a way of saying thank you,
That's cool.
And so that's, I think, part of it. That like, I love that it's like, it's like an NFT that's sort of like more relationship based rather than just being this like sort of like one-time purchase that you make.
About how long does a commission take to yeah?
I think they usually get turned around within a couple days. I know because basically, and so this is what we did with the website, and this was sort of like the other thing that attracted me to it was like we came up with basically this like new primitive that's like very simple, but is a really great way for like commission-based work and commission-based creators to be able to get price discovery. Mm-hmm. And the way it works, basically, like you get in line, you get into the queue. The artist says, like, here's the minimum amount you have to pay for like a commission. But if you want to jump to the front of the line, you can pay more. Mm-hmm. And so it's sort of this like auction to be at the front of the line. And he's just like constantly on a regular basis, like pulling people from the top and making their portraits. So you might end up having to wait a really long time if you're at the back of the queue and people are constantly like pushing their way to the front. But it really just like depends on, like technically speaking, I think it only takes like a couple mm-hmm. days to.
And so is he the only like person working on the art pieces themselves?
I think he had some other people helping or someone else helping at some point. These days, I'm not quite sure. Is the short mm-hmm. answer.
Neat. So I was just looking at the website also. So the starting price for the commission is at 0.1 ETH.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And then just goes up from there if you want to be like higher up in the queue.
Yeah, exactly. Like when you're creating a commission, it just says like you have to put in 0.1 ETH, but if you like, and it'll tell you like, okay, if you put in 0.15 ETH, your position in the queue will be like such mm-hmm. and such, and so.
Though I do like the time modifier. So like if you've been in the queue for a long time, you'll be instantly moved up because you don't want to just be in escrow forever.
Yeah, and that's the other thing is like, I mean, we've talked a little bit about it, that like if the queue ever got really long, that like there were so many people mm-hmm. like sort of stuck at the back of the queue that were never getting processed, he might like one day just sort of do like a debt jubilee kind of thing where he just like goes to the back and it sort of picks out all the people who've been there for like eons, just because that's like I think a kind thing mm-hmm. to do. So
neat. So you're originally from Toronto. You're one of the ex-Toronto club. I feel like there's a lot of those people in Mochi right now.
That's funny. Ex-Toronto, yeah. There's a lot of people from Toronto who leave, which like makes a lot of sense. And yeah, I am a part of that mm-hmm. club. Yeah. Torontonians like moved to America.
And a lot of the club, the the different journeys you've been kind of participating or going for have been around fitness, meditation, and your startup projects. How's fitness and stuff been with quarantine?
Ooh, that's a tough question. That's a tough
Is it
question.
tough or is it shameful to answer?
Yeah, both is the real answer. So, yeah, I mean, when I first joined Mochi, I was doing like a push-ups type challenge where I had to just do, I don't know if it was like a dozen push-ups. I think it was just like I had to do push-ups at least like sort of like one session every day. And I knew that like if I could get myself doing push-ups, I would like do as many as I could, and so that was sort of fine. So I was doing that for a while, and then I was like meditating. I'm not currently part of any like sort of formal journeys, but I have the Daruma doll, and I'm actually like waiting. My Daruma doll is for launching Myco. So it's like when we launch Myco, I will like finally be able to color in that other eye, and I've been waiting like a very long time to be able to do that. Like I said, I've been trying to build this product for like literally years. So I'm very excited for that. But fitness during quarantine has been, here and there. I like to rock climb. So,
oh, nice.
Gyms in New York City opened up, thankfully, like last summer, as long as you're wearing a mask. So that's been pretty okay. And I haven't been recently, especially. I've been pretty busy. I haven't had a chance to work out a lot, but.
Yeah, rock climbing is one of the things I kind of want to try getting into when I'm back in the States eventually. I want to eventually find a place where I'm able to like kind of learn how to do rock climbing, and then also parkour, because I think that would be sick.
Parkour seems very cool. Rock climbing is a great sport. For me, it was mostly just around the fact that
excellent grip training.
Excellent grip training, very good for your hands, but also just like a fun way to do like upper body exercise that's not, I find like gyms are just like very boring. I like could never really get into it. Versus like now, this I feel.
Well, it's good to be doing like mostly body weight exercises, because you can be like lifting barbells and dumbbells all you want, but like still not be in the best health.
Right. And also climbing forces a sort of like very broad range of muscle build, where you have to like, it's not just sort of like one specific motion. You're sort of like doing these strange moves that are like in all different ranges. So
how does cardio play a role in rock climbing? Is it a big factor? Because I know I know it's a lot about grip, it's a lot about upper body strength, but I don't really know how much you need to kind of like monitor your blood pressure or whatever.
It's not, the short answer is like it's not a cardio heavy
is it very explosive?
It's explosive to say, like in certain parts. It's like endurance to some degree, but it's less, it's like not endurance in the way that you are you're not like out of breath that often. You might be for like short, or like you get like, what's called like pumped. You'll get like just like really sore in your forearms where you're like, your grip is like sort of shot. So it's more of like muscle endurance rather than, specifically like actually being out of breath, which I think a good cardio workout, will do.
Yeah, I've always kind of hated running, which is why I am a little bit worried about with like trying to start parkour or whatever. But in a lot of the different like fighting things I've like tried doing, like cardio is super important, especially if it's not just being able to do a kick, it's being able to actually fight with somebody. Because like in 9 times out of 10, if you're fighting with somebody who doesn't know how to fight, they're gonna gas themselves out.
Right. That's true. I have been interested in learning how to fight. That's like a really good skill in general. There was a guy who I met at a random park in New York City who's like a Shaolin monk. So I'm like I was for a period trying to like learn how to do that from him.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, I think my problem with Shaolin, so I there are a lot of martial arts that to me are more of the meditative quality than the combative quality. And I think to me, just because like there isn't much Shaolin and in terms of like in terms of competition, physical competition as opposed to performative. It's far less of like a cardio issue, though they will still do like shitloads of running and have like unbelievable like longevity in terms of, you know, muscle health.
Yeah, they're, from my understanding, Shaolin is much more, they emphasize the like mental aspect sort of more than the physical, and I think it's much more just like, you know, for self-defense rather than you know, as part of some I don't know, competition or anything like that. They definitely are not, because, and I think that just aligns with their whole, you know, vibe of you know, the way that you should
be like water.
Like the right way to treat people, and, you know, being like humble and all that stuff, which a lot of fighters I think are not, and, you know,
I think fighting to me is like interesting in that I think it is something that at some point everybody should learn in some capacity, not necessarily to be able to fight somebody, but to be able to defend yourself and kind of like determine what you're willing to fight for if you need to, either in the literal sense or in like the metaphorical sense, because to a degree, like it'll always require an amount of discipline, and like learning to fight is good for that. I don't know, when you put yourself in actual like physical danger as opposed to just doing like repetitions of something.
So I think it's good. I think it's also just like, I think there's something about the movement in particular with like Shaolin and some of these styles that are very, that like, you know, I think I have this belief that like all of like, people talk about like your physical state, like your physical space affecting your mind, right? Or like, you know, different things like that. I also have a belief that like your body, like the way you move, you know, yoga is really into this idea of like the way you move affects your mind as well. And so I think there's like something about the movements that also has like a sort of way of affecting your state of mind and safety.
They got one of the best weapon selections too, of different martial arts. Yeah, like bow staff, broadswords, spears really big, rope darts, chain whips.
Yeah, that's true. They do have a lot of like, yeah.
So
that's definitely true.
Well, aside from your goals and stuff, what like in the spirit of like cooperative spaces, what kind of either clubs, channels that you're involved in, or kind of hobbies that you've kind of taken upon yourself?
That's a good question. Let's see. So, I mean, one of the things that I've been interested in for a while is sort of like various wisdom traditions. And that sort of stems from my personal belief that the best way to live life, and in particular to approach like religion, is with, or spirituality or whatever, is sort of as a buffet where, you know, you can sort of like see all of the many dishes from all the many different, you know, cultures and sources, and to sort of like take what is good from each of them. And so that's been like sort of like general theology has always been like an interesting undercurrent of what I spend some of my personal time on, and, you know, the sort of like esoteric stuff as well.
I've never thought of religions as a buffet.
Yeah, it's like they're like a buffet, you know, and you like take a little bit of this, like for instance,
somebody takes all the sausages, you gotta wait for them to refresh it, and like
gotta wait for them to refresh it. Yep, that.
Damn it, they're out of Judaism again.
Right. So, yeah, and I think ultimately, like at their core, like the religions are all mostly about the same thing, and they're all just like different methods, right? And so to get to that same end goal of, you know, seeing the world in you and you in the world, and so I think it's like because of the current cultural context that we're in, where we have access to all of this information, you know, we can be really specific and intentional about like which methods are the ones that suit me right now, right? Like what's useful for me, and you can be very you know, like you don't have to be quite so rigorous in terms of just like being identified with like one particular religion or like one particular sect or anything like that. Although you can, which is, you know, also fine. But I think there's like also interesting things that happen when you start to, like I say, for instance, like I've been, fasting some days, for Ramadan these days, because I found that to be like a really interesting sort of like pathway and method. But instead of like, praying a sort of typical Muslim prayer or doing salat or whatever, I've been, meditating in a sort of like much more sort of Zen style. So it's like this, and I think there's like, I think, you obviously want to like retain certain degrees of like respect for religions and these like methods and the cultures and things like that. And I think that's like an important factor. But ultimately, like recognizing that like, yeah, it's all just like different tools for you to
live better.
They're like they're tools.
Be kinder to your neighbor.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right. So that's like sort of like one domain that I'm super interested in. I have some friends who I talk to about that, about that stuff in some communities, but it's not a lot because it's tricky to find people who are, there's like a lot of pitfalls along that path of people studying religions or spirituality that people get caught up in. So it's tricky to find like sort of sustainable communities. That's sort of one. The other one, I don't know. I like talking about philosophy and things like that. Crypto, decentralization.
Man, I wonder if like traditional like religious institutions are eventually going to go like crypto at some point,
Good question.
Like
I mean, to some degree, they probably will, like the Vatican owning some Bitcoin or something. Like
or if they made their own coin and they did their own ICO for like Jesus coins or something, which I'm sure already exists in some capacity.
Right. Yeah, I don't know.
Man, Jesus coin's up. Muhammad coin.
It probably depends.
Muhammad coin's on the rise.
Right. I mean, Muhammad was like, don't, he didn't want you to draw him, let alone launch a token in his name. So I'm not sure what you think of that one, but
Buddha coin.
Yeah, I'm not sure. What I'll say is like, I'm not sure that they are. So I mean, I think the major religions probably don't need a token at this point. But it's also just like stepping back a little bit. Like, of course, you can tokenize any meme that you want, right? And that was like Doge and some of these other ones, cycle, crazy stuff. But really, what I think is true, and it hasn't changed, right? And this is something we saw in the last the last bear sort of cycle, and then people kind of forget, is like launching tokens is like a lot of work, and is not always a high upside activity. It's not always in your best interest to like tokenize yourself or tokenize your religion or all these things. That sometimes that's like actually what you don't want to be doing. And so that's what comes to my mind with these religions is like, they probably don't need the money. I mean, maybe they
I don't know, dude. Televangelists will do anything for a buck. It's their faith, man.
I mean, that's like, so that gets into sort of what I was saying before. It's like, yeah, people love to use religion as like a guise for many other activities, and I think, there's a lot of like gatekeeping there where we see that, people are trying to make a living off of religion, and doing so in a way that like sort of excludes people or I don't know, attempts to hold people back or take advantage of people who are looking for something. Very often that we see that.
Yeah, but in terms of just like just making different organizations where they have like kind of imagining like using Myco as like a platform where they like you might organize with a youth group for like your Lutheran church or whatever, or like a Zoroastrians of Delaware organization or something.
Right. Yeah, that's a great community, and that's, I think, like a useful one. But and this is what we think about with these communities in the context of Myco, is like, we don't think that selling tokens is the right thing for these communities to do. Would
you say that you're kind of like geared more towards like the enterprise level, or like more towards just like individual small creators? Is it like is it as business oriented, or is it more just like on the kind of like organize and then just pool some money and like do stuff with that.
Yeah, so it's sort of, that's like kind of part of the thesis. It's much more in that like earlier stage of the sort of what we think about as like the long tail of creators, right? Who are like maybe working as individuals right now, maybe like not as successful as they could be if they had like a team that they were working with. Definitely not enterprise type scale, but yeah, really much more like earlier stage and helping you like launch a community from scratch, or these, you know, types of and doing that. And for those, you know, like the token, and this is kind of what we have with Myco, is like the token, we help you launch like what we call points, which are sort of semantically somewhat similar to tokens in that like you can reward them to people who are like doing tasks and you know, helping the community and things like that. But the tokens actually are not like tradable. You can't buy them. You can't transfer them to people who aren't in the community. Because what they do is they actually serve as like an ownership right.
Community, like
right?
stocks.
And kind of like stocks, kind of like equity. Yeah, exactly. And so to that degree, it like, you don't want to sell those is the first point. But the second point is like, you don't want to give them to random people. You know what I mean? Like, you don't want the ownership of your community to be taken over by like some random speculators who just want to like, I don't know, pump Zoroastrianism for 2 months just to make next profit. You know what I mean? Like, that's just like not healthy for your community. It's not healthy for like the sort of ideology in general. Like, it's like, it's actually to your detriment, you know? And so how do you make sure, how do you like grow in a sustainable way that like keeps people around, doesn't like go through these short-term wins only to like have that all be erased in the long term?
But what if like a group were to suddenly like start getting a little bit bigger than they had originally anticipated, and they do want to like commercialize in some way?
Yeah, I think that's like fine. Also, I mean, I think there's like regulatory reasons why it becomes tricky, you know, like like depending on how you want to do it, right? So there's like sort of regulatory aspects to it, but generally speaking, yeah, like people, you know, our whole goal is to like enable people to do what they want. We aren't really interested in standing in their way as much, as long as it's like legal. And so yeah, eventually,
Big
if they
caveat.
are at a like, right. So eventually, like at some point, when you do get to a size where you're like, you know, it actually does make sense. Like eventually it does make sense to have external people like starting to give you capital, right? Like if you want to take on bigger projects, you need investment, or, you know, even just to have like strategic investment from like particular people who you want to be sort of like aligned with you and on your side and things like that. There are benefits to it in theory. But that's what we've seen is just like, that's something that is useful for communities like in much later stages of their life. And in general, like shouldn't be something you think about when you're starting the community, but maybe it's something that, you know, you start to think about like much later.
Do you have any like test cases that you've kind of you've kind of like gone through some of the steps with already?
Yeah, and honestly, this is part of what I was trying to do with PixelPortraits. This was like part of the reason I like said yes, was because I wanted to, you know, I think there's like this new paradigm, like I mentioned, of like make money with your friends online, you know, and that's really what we're trying to enable. And so like, how do you do that? Like, what does it feel like to make money with your friends online? What do I want as a user? And so
isn't there like an adage, don't have like your friends be business partners or something?
Right. So that's the old adage. It's like, don't mix business and friendship or whatever. I think that my thesis is that this is actually flipping, where it's like, don't do business with people you wouldn't be friends with, and, you know, like try to make money with your friends online, because it's just so much easier, right? If you can have trusted relationships with like your friends or whatever, and you can use that trust to be able to coordinate in this really efficient way, right? Like when you're in a company, you need like top down bureaucracy, all this stuff, because like you can't coordinate, right? Nobody trusts each other. You can't do things quite so easily. When you have high degrees of trust, you can do things far more efficiently and far more sort of like easily and you know, smoothly. And so we think that there's actually, yeah, that's going to flip on itself, where like people are now going to start making money with their friends. And we need to figure out how to do that. Like, what are the best practices around making money with your friends that like keeps your relationships, you know, whole, but at the same time, enables you to take advantage of them, of that relationship and use it sort of in a win-win kind of way. And I think that's something we're going to see more of as time goes on. And so that was kind of like one thing I was trying to do with the Pixel Portraits, was like make money with my friends and see like what has to happen. Like, what do I feel like as, one of the stakeholders in the earliest stage. And it's been interesting.
Cool. So you're going through right now are you still in like the fundraising stages?
No, we're definitely not fundraising at this point. No, we've got a pretty good runway at this point ahead of us. So we're just like heads down building. I'm like in the code base and helping us kind of just finish the product. So yeah, that's our primary focus. I'm not really doing many calls. I'm getting reach outs from people who are like, oh, hey, we should sync. I want to talk to you about blah, blah, blah. And I'm just telling them sort of like, I need like 3 weeks because I'm just like too busy. So, I do think, I do think there's going to be a time when I'll go back to being able to do that. But these days I'm kind of just like heads down, focused. So
making a quick transition, Mochi Batch 3 just launched, or I think they started last week. What were so yeah, to date this podcast. But what would you say are like kind of the things that you said part of, I don't know if necessarily inspiration, but like partly some of the ideas that you're kind of trying to implement in Myco is like kind of tied with Mochi. What would you say are like some of the more like valuable things you kind of like see in the framework as it is?
It's a really good question. I mean, so obviously the goal sort of setting and management part is really valuable. And I think that there's really cool experimentation that the Mochi community is doing around, how do you like keep each other accountable and things like that. I think that's like really cool. And so that's something that I think is especially worth doing, for people who are getting into it. I mean, I think that like for me as a user, like right now, right, as like a member of the community, my biggest, sort of most valuable part is just like the cultural aspect. Because I think there's just like a lot of really cool people in Mochi, right? Like, and I think that honestly comes from Gabe, because Gabe is like a very sort of like culturally aware person and really plugged into a lot of
hashtag
like really
culture.
Cool stuff. Hashtag culture. Yeah, exactly. And so that I think is like one of the coolest things about Mochi is the culture and the people who are a part of it, who are sticking around, right? Like I mentioned, this idea of like persistent communities that last for a long time. Mochi has been around for such a long time that it sort of has this like really good staying power. And so just like, I'm like a lurker on Slack. I post like a little bit here and there, but I mostly just like consume or see random things people post and I found that to be quite interesting and valuable. And then finally, I guess the other one is just like events, which like, it's quarantine, so like there's no events right now, but like Mochi parties are excellent. You know what I mean? Like,
I hope I get to attend one eventually.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And so, yeah, the Mochi gang like knows how to party. And so, when the time comes, those will definitely, I'm sure, start up again. And that will be like another great thing to do, as part of Mochi. So, yeah, I mean, I've like very long the Mochi community. I love the community.
It's kind of funny.
And I'm
sorry, go on.
Well, I was just gonna say I'm like a part of a few of these, like, partially because this is like I love the idea of community, and I love sort of exploring, like what does it take to build a community and sort of studying it at this like meta level. And so I've joined a lot of these like sort of clubs or communities and things like that. And Mochi is like one of my favorites, and honestly the one that I spend probably the most time in. Just because, it has like a lot of the right qualities that a community really needs. So
it's funny, of all the guests that I've like had for the podcast, like half of them are either really, really involved, or half of them are lurkers. Right. But everybody kind of, if the topic of Mochi, if I do remember that this is a podcast that's tied to Mochi, and then we eventually get to the topic of Mochi, one of the common things that the guest will always bring up is like something related to the culture. And so, I mean, unless you guys are all meeting, like, hey, I'm going to be doing the podcast, what's something to mention about Mochi? Culture. Everybody says culture.
Culture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean,
it's like Mochi like oozes culture. You know what I mean? We like had like a New York City meetup, and we were talking about like James Turrell spaces and all this crazy stuff, and like Japanese art. You know, it's like and it's not easy to find people who are interested in that in a way that is not super like ego driven. I think a lot of people love to like tie their identity to culture and how like great their tastes are, and like look at us, we're so good, like we know all this stuff about art, and I see a lot of that in art spaces or conversations about that.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like with Mochi, it feels much more, I don't want to say egalitarian, but just like grounded, down to earth.
Mm-hmm.
Where like people can like, talk about cool things, cool music, whatever, that is like on the cutting edge, or that people aren't talking about, right? That are like, because that's like what's really cool in culture, is like the thing before everybody else is talking about it, right? It's always like, and so Mochi's always sort of like 6 months ahead of everybody else.
Edgelord Central.
Right, exactly, right. But it's like, how do you be an edgelord without being like a dick? You know what I mean? And like fine line, because like a lot of edgelords are kind of like stuck up and really like puff themselves up about being edgelords, right? And like, oh, I'm so good, like I'm the one who decides what's like culturally relevant, or like I'm just so aware that I like know in advance of everybody. But I think there's like a really good, like sort of grounded, loving, sort of community vibe to Mochi that like eliminates the possibility of that, right? Where it's like really welcoming for anybody, regardless of, like I'm kind of like I'm like not plugged into a lot of these like edgelord type stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I love to consume it, because I'm like, I don't have anything to add. Probably, I don't think, but I love to like be a part of it and see it and experience it, and so I think there's like an aspect there where it's like not so like exclusive.
I think it's also the fact that like a lot of you guys are all like most of the people in Mochi are in some way working or are related to like the crypto space already, which is like super on the fringe right now still of tech.
Right.
While still, being able to make money,
Right. And also like, yeah, like many of us have worked together and have known each other. Like these relationships are quite old. And so that's, I think, like I mentioned, another big part of it is like having enough, like the social graph, having sort of like enough like core connections between people where like people are just like friends with each other. You know what I mean? Like you actually just like hanging out together. And that I think is like, what this whole like make money with your friends online thing. I think that's like what underpins it, is like we can have fun together, but we can also come together and like, there's like so many talented people in the Mochi community that like, yeah, if we put our minds together, I'm sure we can do like very valuable things, right? For ourselves or, online or like whatever. And so it's just like creating the structure for that to be possible. And, Mochi, I think, does a really good job of that, of creating a structure, of bringing in people where, there is that strong, those strong relationship. And there's like enough, shared experiences and, traumas and all that stuff from our past that we can kind of point back to.
I think one of the things I'm also still like reconciling in my head with in terms of like clubs, like I think aside from Mochi, the only like real like club that I would say was a huge investment of my life was like a fraternity in college. And it's just always it's always hard to kind of like justify what goes into being a part of that, and like there's all the culture around it, everything about clubs, like it was you can't spell culture without cult, and like it's really hard to kind of like justify and make it sound like something that is really ultimately desirable and better for your life. But like a lot of the best people I've met in my life have been like in my fraternity. A lot of like the positive changes that I think I've made in my life have been as a result of like meeting those people and participating in events and organizations, and like learning from like other people whose interests might be like wildly different from me, but we still have this like common interest and this common thing that like keeps us together.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's like part of the reason why I'm so like I'm very long communities as a concept, right? And I think like
it's a human thing.
It's a human thing, right? And it's like it's a thing that like because we're now all living on the internet and like our physical communities are pretty dead, and every chance like every attempt to revive them has like generally not worked. So that doesn't seem like it's going to reverse course. And I think like that sort of leads us to this like future state where people are like finding their tribes online, and like finding these like persistent group relationships, memberships, and things like that are like lifelong things, that like they're like your people, and you might be a member of like 2 or maybe 3 of these. One of them you might be a leader in, one of them you might just be a consumer, one of them you might be sort of like somewhere in the middle. But like that like ultimately it provides like it like feels like a very real human need, that we often don't realize is there until we have it filled, and then we're like, holy shit, this is like amazing. I didn't even know that I needed this, And I feel like that's a lot of how people feel with like communities. Like they don't realize how starved of community they are until, they get it. And I think like, and this gets into the whole thing of like people are feeling really lonely these days, right? And COVID was a big part of that. But I think even before that, there was a huge sentiment of like loneliness. But I think a lot of people just like immediately attributed that to sort of like intimate loneliness, right? Or like sort of like relationship type loneliness, where people expect that it's like because they don't have a significant other or like, things like that.
Like everything became like a status or like a failing if right. a quality of, how successful they are in their life, whether or not they have a partner, whether or not they have like they're part of a business or like a successful enterprise. That was all right. Wrapped together with ego, as opposed to just like, kind of like filling this part of like what makes a person feel like they're loved and fulfilled and
and that they belong to something, right? Like belongingness needs one of those like the Maslow needs, and I think it's just like that core need that we all have to belong, but also just to like be a part of something that's like bigger than ourselves, right? And to play like humans at their best are coming together and joining forces to like where the sum is greater than, or the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. Like when you're doing that, when you're like experiencing, you're like, holy shit, I am like just this, like I'm doing my best work, but everyone else is doing their best work, and this thing we've come up with is like we couldn't have expected how awesome this thing is, right? Or even if you're not talking about productive output, even if you're just talking about like the sort of like community vibes. One primary example of this is like my Burning Man camp that I camp with, and a lot of cool people there, and it's again one of those things of like you sort of step back and our goal is just to like go to Burning Man together, but it's like when we do it and you sort of step back at like what we've achieved, we're like, wow, this is like I couldn't have imagined doing this without you guys, and it's like it's only possible because there's this like sort of like collection of energy all going into it all at once.
I think just like the weird thing to me is kind of the intersection between like church, club, and cult, and like trying to not say that you're a church, trying to not say that you're a cult, or like you pick one and you eliminate the other two. It's always hard because like a lot of the language is very similar, but they all do serve that like that belonging need that we all have.
Yeah, I mean, what makes a cult is a great question, and I don't have a clear answer for that.
Technically, I think cult is like the larger umbrella. I think all religions are in some way a cult, but not every cult becomes a full religion. I think that's my understanding of it as it is now, but I mean, I could also be completely wrong.
Yeah, I think you're generally right. I mean, I think from what I've seen, cults typically are like, if you can have a group of people who like sort of believes something with like a shared sense of belief that's like fixed to a degree that it's not going anywhere, or like it's like sort of ingrained to a degree that it like is not easily changed or disrupted, even in the face of information that seems to conflict that belief. That's like a pretty good way to know that something is like a cult. But I think, honestly, like my personal take on this is that like all of these things are all blending into each other. And this is like at Myco, we use this word like co to talk about groups of people. We now kind of call them clubs, but like originally it was just co, because a co, it's just like a group of people, because what we see
co-op,
is that,
cooperating,
like,
cooperation.
Right. Because it's like companies are blending into communities, are turning themselves into communities. Communities are turning themselves into collectives. Collectives are turning themselves into co-ops. And like really, they're like we think in like 20 years, and cults are part of that too. The cults start with a CU, so we don't include it in the thing, but they're also a part of it as well.
It's like it's like the Pokemon that doesn't actually fit the naming structure of the evolution chain there.
Right, exactly. But it's like clearly they're like actually all of them are cults, technically speaking. But it's just, yeah, it's one of those things where like it's like they're all blending into each other, because it's all just like groups of people learning off of the way that other groups of people have done things previously, whether it's like a company learning from how collectives work and how they're able to organize really efficiently, or communities learning how companies make money and are able to organize themselves that way, or collectives learning how co-ops work and the way that like fair ownership can help sort of like maintain these relationships and create a really like sturdy culture and things like that. They're all like, it's all just like them learning off of each other and like learning what works and what doesn't when you want to get a group of people to work together, use the internet. And I think because of the way the internet works, we're like going to see, over the next, like 20 years, we're going to see, I think, a big sort of explosion of these groups and people, being a part of them, launching them, spending a lot of time in them, and really just like focusing much more on like the group relationships rather than, like personal relationships. I feel like social media up until now was so much of it was about like your social graph in a very like specific sense of like, I know X people, or I'm related to X people, or I follow X people. Whereas now it's like, I don't know, like you and I, for instance, right? Like, I don't know that much about you. We're like, but we like are members of Mochi together. And that membership, that co-membership, like automatically creates a sort of like base relationship between us, And so it's like the instead of us having to be connected one-to-one, we can just be connected to these like hubs that bring many people together. And I think that's like something we're going to start seeing a lot more of. And then as that happens, like they're just going to learn, like how do you get groups of people to do things whatever their goals happen to be.
So would you say this is kind of like an evolution of social networking? Or is it like more, would you say it's more of an evolution of that, or like more of an evolution of like, the church group, the friend groups?
I think they're all the same. Like, I think they're all like, all of those things are eventually going to become different permutations of each other, because they were ultimately just groups of people coming together for a particular goal. Right. And sometimes that goal was making money. Sometimes it wasn't. Sometimes the goal started being making money, but you eventually became friends, if you, at your like office, at your job, you usually like, if you're in the office, you'll like have groups of friends. Right. And many of my best friends in New York City are people who I met through consensus, right. Where we originally were there, quote unquote, as like a job, but friendship sort of arose naturally out of that. Or, so it's like, I think have been operating for such a long time under this guise of like, companies are this one thing where it's like a corporation and it's this, and then you have like this other thing which is like groups of friends, and that they're like actually very different, when at their core they're actually very much the same. The only difference is like, what are people there to do, right? Like what is the purpose, what are the goals, what are the values, but that like their needs are ultimately like very similar, depending on what the circumstances are.
And the level of their like their business arrangements with clients and whatever.
Right, exactly.
Interesting. A very, I think definitely like a very like necessary kind of growing space, like going forward into like, I think we're starting and like kind of trying to get away from just the mass data collection that we've kind of been exposed to because of like Facebook and Google. And like in my mind, at the very least, because at least in Mochi, I don't know how different like co's would organize with Myco, but like at least in Mochi, there's also that shared kind of like there is that common point of you kind of had to go through like the interview process. You needed to be a friend of a friend in some way, related to Mochi. So there is already that commonality aside from like compared to Facebook, where it's just I have a Facebook account. Now what do I do? Now do I add people? Do I do whatever? It's
Right.
I think because it is like a directed club with a culture that is like meant to kind of be preserved and meant to be continued. I think the direction definitely helps in giving it more value than just a collective friendathon.
Right. Yeah, and I think what you mentioned, sort of the idea of like private clubs, right, where the memberships are curated, right? I think that's like a huge aspect of it. Where yeah, because like I mentioned before, you know, right, like you and I don't know each other, but I know I can trust you because like the group has decided it can trust you, and that means like somebody at some point like admitted you because you know what I mean, and that has to be maintained. Otherwise, like the whole thing drops off. You know, then you have like then I can't. You know, if I start like I mean, using you as a weird example.
Yeah, there's a weird faith in nepotism there.
Well, I mean, sure. I think that's like, you know, you're like friends either by birth or by, you know, whatever. But, but my point is like, imagine there's like somebody in Mochi who like was let in who maybe shouldn't have been, right? And I trusted them because they were part of Mochi and they like screwed me over. They like lied to me or whatever. Not only does that like make me not like this person,
well, it makes you feel distrustful about the organization.
Right. And so these organizations exactly have to sort of maintain their own levels of quality around membership curation, making sure you're not letting in people who are going to, you know, ruin the group, because it is actually very possible for like one bad apple to sort of like ruin the bunch. It does happen. And, you know, like if you're part of a group of friends, you can have like one person completely just kill the vibe.
Or one person in like a journey who's like constantly getting everybody else slashed.
Right. Yeah, I've also had that happen. Yeah, literally.
I wonder if technically that metaphor of the apples applies to like the food mochi. Does one bad mochi spoil the rest of the other mochi? Maybe if they're all apple flavored.
Maybe. I also, most of the mochis I'm used to being around are like frozen, so I can't ever imagine. I like never imagine the idea of mochi spoiling because I'm like.
Yeah, and they're usually all like separated in like the little container.
Right. But anyway, so yeah, going back, I guess, yeah, I do think that there's an element there of the curation that's like super necessary, and that's like ultimately what powers the like community being, you know, being able to thrive is off of that.
Well, eventually, also, my understanding is that there's also going to be a lot of like the voting in the works as to like kind of the direction that Mochi's going to be going about, like what stuff is going to be where, what's going to be available to members, which is like agency is definitely like an important thing. If you could like fucking vote on Facebook to like change Facebook features, that'd be awesome. But I mean,
right.
I still have a firm belief that they're the whole thing where if you like click on your like your Facebook app and it's got like the little red mark in your thing and it doesn't go away after you click it, like the notifications. I mean, I believe that's a feature.
Yeah. I mean,
I don't think that's an accident.
Facebook is such an evil company that I'm like, my opinions on Facebook, I'm like, we could spend another hour and a half talking about that. But yeah, being able to vote on Facebook, I think we're probably too late for that.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want anything to do with Facebook at this point, but in theory, yeah, that's exactly, I think you're right. And that's also what we're trying to do with Myco is like actually give ownership of Myco to our users in such a way that like by using Myco, you're like automatically a co-owner of the platform. And the case study that we think about a lot is actually Ashton Kutcher, who was like I think he was like the first Twitter user to get to 1 million followers. He like was such an important member of that platform originally. And
I didn't know that.
He got nothing. He got nothing out of it. He doesn't use Twitter anymore because like, you know, he probably doesn't want to. Because he wasn't an owner, he had no control, he had nothing. He like was basically like, yeah, he just did all this like free work for them and didn't get anything. And so he, I think, feels, I'm sure, probably super slighted by the whole thing.
So everybody who uses Myco has a direct interest in Myco also succeeding.
Yeah, exactly. And they should be rewarded fairly for the fact that they like helped us grow or helped us, you know, provide like user feedback and all this stuff. Like, yeah, that's like what, you know, these sustainable, like I said, like we're thinking a lot about like sustainable relationships, sustainable business relationships, sustainable group relationships. Like, I don't want to have you use Myco for a week and then drop off. I want you to use Myco for the rest of, you know, I don't want to say the rest of your life. That's like a very long time. But like for a long period, you know, for like a long duration, I want you to stick around, and I want you to feel like you have agency to influence it. I also want you to feel like you have upside in, like, if we win, you win, you know, and vice versa as well. Like that we have upside in the communities that, you know, and that's kind of our revenue model, is that like we ideally would rather you not just like pay us in money. We'd rather just like give us a little bit of your sort of like equity or whatever, and have us have upside in you. That way, like we want you to succeed. Our whole
mutual success.
We only, yeah, exactly. We only make money if you make money, and on a group level, on an individual level, and that like that's sort of the best way to keep people around and to keep people, you know, really like the incentives aligned.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like a nice transition away from like the subscription based like Netflix or iTunes or not iTunes, what's Spotify or like all these other like these pop-up like monthly delivery things where like they bank on you signing up once, leaving your credit card number on there, and then forgetting that you have an account, and you're just like paying monthly until you end your subscription. Like getting away from that, it definitely appeals to me.
Yeah, likewise. And that's what we're trying to move towards. You know, we're still not, we don't know the final answers yet, but it seems like things are becoming clear enough that we can start to really experiment like live, and you know, we're close enough that like we can sort of evolve the last little bit. Because we've been, you know, I've been trying to think about this stuff for like I said, years. And, you know, if you'd asked me 2 years ago what this looks like, my answer would have been a lot crappier than the one I have right now. So,
well, I think it's like tattoos. I definitely think it's like tattoos, where like you got to have the idea for more than 1 year before you decide to like actually go through with it and it be worth getting.
Yeah, that's a good heuristic.
And really it sticks with you for the rest of your life unless you actually get like a dedicated removal thing via bankruptcy or whatever.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, I mean, tattoo removal hurts like a son of a bitch.
I'm sure bankruptcy feels that way too.
Bankruptcy? Yeah, probably. Although bankruptcy, like, I think after like 5 years after bankruptcy, you start to like build your credit again.
Yeah.
Right? So you can like, you know what I mean? Some tattoo removal, like you do like 10 sessions, you still have like a faint, you know, outline. Like tattoos never really go away. It's very, very hard to get them like fully gone.
Do you have any tattoos?
I do, and one of them I've been trying to remove, and it like doesn't work. And
you're giving me a little bit too much detailed information about this. I was getting suspicious.
Yeah, I'm like I've tried. It was like and it just doesn't work. You can't just like willy-nilly remove tattoos. And I mean, I'm like fine, you know, at this point I've like accepted my fate, but it was an interesting experience trying to remove tattoos. It hurts more than the tattoo, which is interesting. It's all very like autopoetic.
Hopefully bankruptcy is nowhere ever in your future though, so let's avoid the poetry in that sense.
Yeah, hopefully. And honestly, worst case, like, I'll be fine. Yeah. Life is a way of like giving you what you need, not necessarily what you want. So, you know, I'm sure if I become bankrupt, like probably teach me a good lesson, I'm sure.
That's a good way to look at it. All right, so we're approaching the end of our time. So the PixelPortrait.com, myPixelPortrait.com, correct? thePixelPortraits.me.
Like thePixelPortraits.me or .com, I think redirects.
Myco.space. Myco.space launching sometime in the future.
Launching soon. Sign up. I'll be posting about it on Mochi when we're live. So if you want to experiment, you can
awesome.
do that.
Anything else you kind of want to pitch, plug? You got an Insta. You got a.
Meditate? No, I'm not gonna pitch my Insta. I'm like, if you want to find me on Instagram, you can find me on Instagram. But that's like, I just use it for personal, whatever. So no, you don't have to follow me there. Yeah, follow me on Twitter. That's like where I talk about all the stuff that I talked about on this podcast. And yeah, I don't know, meditate. That's like what I'll show. I will show meditation more than anything else. I'm like, it will solve all of your problems. Literally, there's like not a single problem that meditation will not solve. I guarantee.
Being on fire.
We'll talk. I'm like,
okay, Mark, thank you for coming on. Thanks for being my guest.
Thanks again for having
stay
me.
on. I'm gonna just get us out of here.
Okay, cool.